What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the D.O.G podcast. My name is Drew. That's my boy German, and we're going to talk a little bit about soccer today.
Okay, yeah, man. So we have the two cities in Canada with Toronto and Vancouver. Did you take a look at the stadiums at all? Did you see them?
So Toronto, I believe that's where they held the final for the Women's World Cup in
Yeah.
2015. It's all right. It's not bad. They got it's kind of it's funny because in the US, like the US stadiums, they all have like ginormous jumbotrons,
Yeah.
and then in Toronto, it's like a almost like a small little hockey one.
Right.
It's not too big. But what I would want to find the most interesting is that's a turf field. I'm assuming they're gonna put sod over it, so that'll be that's there's a lot of U.S. stadiums too that are all turf that they're gonna have to bring in grass for, because I highly doubt the men are gonna want to play on turf.
For sure.
So that's kind of interesting. The Vancouver, the Whitecaps one, it's not bad. It's not big. They're not too terribly big. They're not like European style stadiums where you're fitting 100 or 85 to 100,000 people.
Right.
It's more along the lines of like 50 to 60,000 people, which is not bad. I mean, you're gonna have Canada play up there. You're probably gonna have Ecuador, some small teams play up there, and all the big name guys, they're gonna be playing in the U.S. most likely.
Oh yeah, for sure. And then I want to say that they're one of those in Canada are a soccer only stadium. So that is kind of rare, especially here in the U.S. because I think most, if not all, the stadiums that are hosting the
They're all
World Cup,
multi-use.
they're all multi-use, primarily NFL. And like you said, a lot of them do have turf, and they're gonna have to do something to go ahead and switch those out, because outside of Mexico and Canada, all the other ones are used for the NFL primarily, right?
Yeah, I think we'll talk about it, but I believe Santa Clara and Miami might be and Philadelphia are the only grass. Oh, Kansas City. Oh, I guess
Kansas
there's a little
City.
bit more than I thought.
There's a little bit more, but there's a lot of them. Like, I know for sure the MetLife Stadium, that one's all turf, so they're gonna have to do that one next, right? And that's the next one I want to get into. So let's go ahead. Let's work our way from the East Coast going into the West Coast. Starting off with New York, man. How do you feel MetLife is gonna hold up?
I mean, it's always pretty shitty during football season,
right?
But that's during the wintertime. It's New York. That's the reason why the game's there. I mean, there's nothing fancy about MetLife. It's in New Jersey, really, and there's nothing exciting necessarily about it. It holds a lot of people, and it's like in the mecca of the East Coast. So that's the only reason why it's there.
Yeah, for sure. And then the next one that actually kind of surprised me was Boston and Gillette.
Dude, Gillette,
yeah.
That's kind of stunning to me.
I was not expecting that to be one of the major host cities. What do you think about that one, man?
I was pretty shocked. I feel like there's a lot of other stadiums that they could have throughout the country they could have utilized.
Yeah.
The only thing I can kind of think about right here is kind of New England area. They're going a little patriotic. They're hoping that maybe they can bust out a handful of fans out there to kind of make some noise. But I really don't know. I mean, the Patriot fans, that's where they're all at. They're up there in Boston. They really only like one team and one team only. They're not going to go to an Ecuador versus Belgium game there.
No, yeah, for sure. They're going to have to actually put, I feel like, a high profile game there, right, to get the fans to go
to get people
to Boston.
Going.
I've never been to Boston, but I hear
it's very racist, bro.
Yeah, that's what
very
I hear.
Very racist.
I hear
you're going to see
Switzerland
hostile versus Sweden there. You're going to see a bunch of white guys only.
Not Cameroon versus Ghana or something.
No, that's not happening.
So the next one, let's go ahead. Let's take it down south in Atlanta with the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I feel like that's actually going to be a pretty good host stadium there.
Yeah, if you've seen any of the MLS games, Atlanta, they got a rowdy crowd. They fill that stadium up. It seats, I'm pretty sure, right around 100,000 people. They got the big old Halo scoreboard, so there's a great view on any seat. Atlanta fans can get down pretty good. You got the Hawks, you got the Braves, you got the Falcons when they made the run. Like, Atlanta fans, they show up. Atlanta FC, they're representing. So I think it's a good choice. I wasn't really shocked at all to see that one. I expected that one.
I expected that one too because, like you said, it's it's actually built up since the MLS has been there for actually quite a while now. And
Yeah.
Atlanta FC has actually been a pretty entertaining team to watch through the
Hmm.
MLS. So
As entertaining as MLS can be.
exactly, because I mean they have some actually high profile players that are pretty fun to watch, and for that one to be a host city, I think that was a good idea.
Hmm.
One that I didn't think was going to be all that great of an idea was Philadelphia. What do you think about that one?
Again, I'm thinking that's more of a patriotic thing, Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Um, it's maybe they kind of hit those areas because it's pretty
Hmm.
cool. Assuming that the World Cup will end up being in the summer again, it's a
Right.
little on the cooler side. It will get humid there, I believe, Philly in the summertime.
Philadelphia, I don't think so because it's Pennsylvania. It's
Yeah,
quite
I'm
away
not
from the
100%
wick.
sure.
Yeah.
I've never been. I'll probably never go
Hmm.
there because fuck Philly. Um,
It's just nothing.
uh,
Nothing really draws you to Philadelphia, right?
no,
When you think
can
about
you
party culture, nightlife, like Philadelphia is not
can
one
you
of those.
imagine Mbappe playing against De Bruyne in Philadelphia?
In
Like the
Philadelphia.
fuck is that? A
Yeah, so that one's kind of interesting.
little bit
I
of a question
wasn't
mark for me.
I
It's a
really
big
wasn't
stadium.
expecting that one. It's a big stadium. It's an older stadium. It's not really flashy, but I guess it was
Hmm.
just good enough for FIFA to go ahead and select that one as one of the host cities. Another one I thought was kind of interesting was Arrowhead Stadium over in Kansas City. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, I find that extremely like kind of out of left field. I really don't get it, other than it's kind of in the central part of the country.
Right.
It's a big stadium. They fit a lot of people there.
Hmm.
But I mean, uh, I don't think there's a whole lot of soccer fans there. I mean, they got Sporting KC there,
Right.
but they have their own stadium. I mean, they don't play at Arrowhead,
Hmm.
and I don't believe it's too great of a fan base. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm pretty novice to when it comes to MLS,
Hmm.
so I really couldn't tell you if they got a great following, but it's
Right.
not big enough for me to know. I know that both LA teams, Seattle, Houston, even Austin now has a great following.
Right.
Atlanta has a great following. I don't hear anything about Sporting KC, so it's a little bit of a shocker. I'm just assuming it's a big stadium in the central part of the country.
Yeah, and I think you hit it. You hit it right on the head. There is. I think it's because it's in the middle of the country and it's a big stadium. So I think that's
Yeah.
why. That's why they're probably going with that one because they want to draw more people to the Midwest. I
Hmm.
mean, you see a majority of these games, if not all of these games, are either on the West Coast or the East Coast. So
Yeah.
not a lot of games being hosted there in the middle of the country. Moving on, let's go ahead. Let's go to Houston in the middle. I mean, another team that's in the middle of the country. I would say maybe it's closer to the coast, over to the Gulf of Mexico. What do you think about that one?
Um, I I don't get it because they have a game in Dallas. They're using Dallas.
Yeah.
I understand it's an indoor stadium. It is big. You can fit a lot of people, but you got AT&T right there. They're using it.
Right.
They're using Dallas. They're using AT&T. I probably wouldn't have doubled up that close. I probably would have ventured out and gone somewhere else. That's my opinion.
The only reason I would say maybe Houston is maybe because the capacity to the city. Maybe it's because
Hmm.
it's a little bit bigger of a city, and they're expecting maybe more people to kind of be drawn to a city where there's going to be large infrastructure in order to host these events, right? Because
Yeah.
I mean, we're anticipating maybe, if not the biggest World Cup of all time, right? Because of the new
Yeah.
format, new teams being added. So we're expecting maybe there to be a pretty high turnout, especially
Hmm.
from people that are traveling out of the country coming this way, and then not and let alone the people who are already here. I feel like Houston, maybe locally, there's a little bit more of a fan base there
Hmm.
because Mexico's a little bit closer. Maybe that's another reason why they're having maybe a little bit more travelers coming from Mexico.
Maybe, but Mexico has three stadiums. I'm going to assume Mexico is going to play all three games, in their group stage,
At home,
in at home. Yeah.
for sure. Oh yeah,
Actually,
100%.
it's only going to be two group stage games. We'll go over that a little bit later on.
Yeah, yeah. And then go ahead and then moving on, like you said, AT&T Park over there over at Jerry World. I'm pretty sure he's pretty happy, and that one
Yeah.
felt like that one
It,
was a
it,
given,
it
right?
was it was a given.
Yeah.
It was obvious. No way you're gonna have the World Cup in the U.S. and Jerry Jones not make some money off of it. I'm assuming this is where the final's gonna be.
That's that's what I wanted to get to a little bit later.
Hmm.
but that definitely is one of the contenders. Let's go ahead. Let's go over to the East Coast and let's go to Seattle, which we're the home of the Seattle Sounders, another
It,
MLS team.
it makes sense to me. We know Seattle in football and baseball, and also in MLS, like you said, the Sounders.
Mhm.
They got great fans out there, man. They show up, they get rowdy, they get noisy. It's a great stadium. It brings in a lot of sound.
Right.
That's one of the reasons why they're called the Sounders. Actually,
Yeah.
I think there's a fish or something like that. But yeah, it only makes sense. I mean, they're known for the 12th man in
Right.
football. They could be the 12th man in the World Cup. So it makes a lot of
Mhm.
sense to me. Cooler climate too.
Cooler climate over on the West Coast, and then you're going to get a little bit more culture, I think, out of Seattle, right? Like I feel like
Yeah.
that's Seattle. That's kind of one of the cities I think of as like a tourist destination. Where
For
you get
sure.
people traveling to, which I think going to a game there would be awesome, just because one, Seattle I think is an awesome city, and then plus
Hmm.
it's the stadium itself. It's a 12 man. It's one of the loudest stadiums in the world, and
Oh yeah,
if we get a big club or a big team that plays there, I think it's going to be awesome.
oh for sure.
Moving on to Levi Stadium, the closest stadium to us here in the Central Valley. What do you think about that, man?
Low key kind of surprised. I
Really?
didn't really, I didn't really expect
Mm-hmm.
um the Bay Area to land
Mm-hmm.
a game. I just wasn't thinking about. I was thinking, because I was thinking more based on cities that have a good fan base, a good following. Like where
Yeah.
has the U.S. played some of
Mm-hmm.
their matches throughout the last couple of years, and where the fans shown up. But it is a big tourist destination.
Right.
Granted, you're gonna have people from another country want to come and watch the game at Levi's, and then they're gonna find out they're an hour and 15 minutes away still from San Francisco. So that's going to kind of be shitty for the people coming from out of town. But it's great weather. The stadium has a capacity. I've never been there. I heard the views aren't that great, but it's an all grass field. It's less work. It
Mm-hmm.
has the capacity to have people come from out of country to come watch. Good
Mm-hmm.
weather. And it's another West Coast stadium. So it does make sense, but at the same time, I don't know. I kind of felt like they could have used somewhere else.
So Levi, I've actually been to Levi Stadium quite a bit because, well, one, I'm a 49er fan. That's the home of the
Boo.
49ers. But I've also gone to a couple of soccer games there. I don't know if you remember way back when the U.S. hosted Copa America, and that's where
Hmm.
Mexico played Colombia, and I think. Or
Yeah.
yeah, Colombia, and then they lost like Mexico lost like 7-2 or something like that. So I was there for that, and
Hmm.
it actually is really a state of the art stadium because it doesn't really look at it like when you see it on TV, but when you're there, like the seats are awesome, like the spacing's awesome, like everything about the stadium, like the way it works, it really is state of the art. I feel like that's maybe one of the big reasons why they would choose Levi Stadium as a host city. I
It might be
do
the newest stadium other than LA. Yeah.
other than SoFi, which we'll get into next. But it definitely does bring up the question of one: is it really going to attract that many local fans? Because
Hmm.
there not really are that many soccer fans there in the Bay Area,
Mm.
but they will draw a bunch of fans from the Central Valley, which I think the Central Valley, especially when it comes to soccer, I think this is where the biggest fan base is at.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, it'd be tough to compete with SoCal, but yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
we definitely got more fans. I would assume here
Mhm.
than the Bay Area and Northern California.
Speaking of SoCal, the other one that was a given, SoFi Stadium, another state of the art stadium, a stadium that
Yeah,
you've been
brand
to,
new.
right?
I've been to. Yeah, it's
Hmm.
awesome. It's really cool. You really don't need a seat to watch a game there. There's a
Hmm.
bar that goes all the way around the stadium on each level. That is right behind the last row of the section. So I went to a Cowboys game there. I bought the cheapest ticket I could find, and then I went down to the second level and just kind of stood there and watched the entire game. It's pretty worth it.
Yeah.
If I went to a game in SoFi for the World Cup, I'd probably do the same thing. Buy the
Hmm.
cheapest ticket I can find, get there as soon as I can, and stand behind it. There is one thing that I did not like at
Hmm.
SoFi, and that is the roof is just windows. It's clear,
Yeah.
which
Hmm.
is cool to let the sunlight in. It feels like, a day
Hmm.
game, football game. The Cowboys played
Right.
at 1 o'clock. The sun came in, but that sun is beaming down on you through a magnifying glass. So it was
Hmm.
still just as hot.
The heat. Yeah.
The third deck, you could feel the breeze because that's actually the street level,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no like doors to come into the stadium. It's all
Mm-hmm.
open airway. So up
Right.
there, I was up there for a little while, and there was a cool breeze. It wasn't bad. I went down to the lower level, and it got
Mm-hmm.
hot. And I'm
Yeah.
assuming even down to the first level and on the field, it's got to be pretty hot down there,
Right. And
which
that's
is a
a
little inconvenient for an indoor stadium, but
right. And that's what
it
I
was cool, I
feel.
guess.
I feel like people don't really understand about LA. That LA, yeah, it is close to the coast, but it still gets pretty hot
It's
over
pretty
there. Like
warm in LA. Yeah.
when it gets to like the 80s and the 90s, especially in the summer, it gets
Hmm.
actually pretty freaking hot.
Yeah.
So that's why I know I had some questions about that stadium too. I remember when they announced it and they were going to go ahead and say, "Oh, we're going to have it as a dome," which I was like, "Okay, for LA weather, that's a little weird." And then when the whole glass thing came out, and then no AC system, and then it is a closed top, but it's really open, right?
Yeah.
Because coming from the sides, like there's really no walls. Like
Nope.
I mean, people can walk
No,
in
it's
from any
it's all
direction.
free reign. Yeah.
Hmm. So yeah, so that's for me. I felt like that's probably going to be another contender for the host city of the final. What do you think?
Yeah, LA. It's a
Hmm.
huge market.
Hmm.
That would make sense. I mean, assuming you're gonna have some pretty big name players playing in the
Right.
final, you're gonna want to make sure that they're put up pretty nice
Hmm.
in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Um, but then again, they're also using the Coliseum. Um, or no, the Rose Bowl.
No,
I'm sorry, they're using the Rose
actually,
Bowl.
are they? No, I don't think they are. So I'm looking at
Uh,
the host stadium. No, that's the only.
I thought that
SoFi
they
is
had
the
it.
only stadium in Los Angeles that's hosting any of the games.
Oh well, that's
Hmm.
awkward.
Yeah. So
I would have
yeah, I
rather
mean,
have hosted it at the Rose Bowl, honestly.
so they
Fit
actually
more fans.
there was already a final in the Rose Bowl stadium. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's where
It's like
Brazil.
'96.
Yeah, that's where Brazil won the World Cup in the '90s. And then
Hmm.
even my dad was talking to me about it because he was around for that, and he said that they didn't really even fill up the Rose Bowl stadium like when it was the final.
Oh
Like
yeah,
there
it's
was
like
still
110,000 people. It's
yeah,
huge.
so it's huge.
Hmm.
But I think it's going to be a different story this time, especially with SoFi. I really
Hmm.
do think that if the final were to be there, they would definitely fill it up. And I feel like LA has the infrastructure already in place to hold in a major event like that. Like, yes,
Hmm.
I understand like Dallas has hosted big events like that, but I don't think it's ever been anything to the scope of a World Cup final, let alone probably the biggest World Cup final of all time, which we're assuming it's probably gonna be the biggest because it's a bigger tournament, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like they have the infrastructure already there. I mean, they've hosted tons of events. Then plus they hosted the Super Bowl not too long back, and I feel like with all the way they've redone the airport. I don't know if you've been to LAX lately,
Nah.
but I've been there recently, and it's actually they fixed it up pretty nice. The parking all the way around it, all the way through it has been completely revamped, and it's a lot better.
Okay, cool.
So moving on to Mexico, dude. Let's go ahead and start with the north of Mexico in Monterrey. What do you think about that stadium? Have you seen it?
I've seen a couple of pictures of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know. It's a stadium. I couldn't name a bunch of other stadiums in Mexico, so I'm assuming this is one of their more premier stadiums.
Right.
I'm just gonna kind of go with that.
So
They probably picked the three. I mean, the one in Guadalajara, Mexico City. It only makes sense. It's a very populated place. I'm gonna assume that Monterrey is probably like the next best one.
So there's definitely bigger cities in Mexico, but because of Monterrey is a little bit closer to north of Mexico, it's a lot closer to Texas.
Hmm.
So I've been to Monterrey before, and I would actually compare it to some of the cities here in the U.S. Just because it is a little bit nicer, it is a little bit cleaner, given that it has been quite a while since I've been over there.
Hmm.
But looking at the pictures of the stadium, because it is a brand new stadium, I think it's only, I would say, less than 10 years old. And the way they've built it and the way they've structured it, it's super clean. It's really nice. I'm actually pretty excited for that one. If I were to go to a game in Mexico, other than Stadio Azteca, that would be another one I would go to. But that carries on to Estadio Azteca, dude, right? Like probably the biggest
It's a
stadium.
given. Yeah.
I think it's the biggest stadium in North and South America, right?
I
If I'm
don't
not
know that.
mistaken, it's like a hundred over 100,000 capacity. So I think it is, or if not one of the biggest stadiums in North
Hmm.
and South America. Um, but my dad's been there. He said it's huge. It's an incredible stadium, and it's already hosted 2 finals there. So
Yeah.
I don't think there's going to be any trouble with them hosting any of the games there, especially if Mexico plays one of their group games there.
Yeah, what I think is going to be interesting is you're going to eventually get a couple of random teams playing there. You know, two random countries.
Right.
Um, it's going to be interesting because it's in an altitude and a climate that a lot of people have never played in before. If you end up getting a Sweden or a Switzerland, or a Belgium, these guys traveling that far south in the humidity, a mile up in the air,
Right.
it's going to be different. It's going to be definitely something that they're not used to playing in the fair weather of Europe.
For sure, it's going to be a surprise, especially to those European teams, the Central and South American teams, or even the teams from North America. It's not going to be a surprise for them because
Yeah.
a lot of them have already played there. But
Mhm.
definitely, those European teams are going to be like, "Fuck this."
Yeah, it's going to be totally different for them.
And then the last one I want to go over is the Guadalajara, that stadium over there. OC's been to that stadium. He says it's awesome.
He goes there like every year,
Yeah.
well, at least.
Right. Yeah. And then, well, we seen the pictures of it. It looks pretty nice. I
Looks
feel like
nice.
they are gonna change some things about it. I know that they started off with AstroTurf, and I think they switched over to natural grass. I think
Mhm.
a lot of the players, especially there in Mexico, were complaining about the way that stadium was built and the way
Mhm.
the field is. But that's another host city. I feel like in Mexico that was a given, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Like I said, Guadalajara, Mexico City, those were givens. The Monterrey, I really don't know a lot about Liga MX, but it seems like a kind of a given to me too.
Right. Are there any cities, especially in the U.S., that you felt were surprising that
Las
didn't get a game?
Vegas,
That was the
Las
one I was going to
Vegas,
bring up for sure. That's the
easily
biggest
Las
one,
Vegas. I don't know how they didn't get the game. That's
right? I
kind of
mean, you
of
have
I probably I would have either dumped New York or Philadelphia or Boston or Philadelphia for Las Vegas, easily, hands down.
yeah, like you would assume with it being a brand new stadium with the Legion Stadium, and from all
Yep.
accounts, everybody says it's a masterpiece. Like everybody says
Yeah.
it's
Oh, it's
awesome.
beautiful. And everything looks great.
It's an indoor stadium, and then on top of it, it's Vegas. It's
It's Las Vegas.
probably the most hotel rooms in any other
Yeah.
city in the
Hmm.
across the country, right?
Yeah. Easily. I mean, the only thing I can think of is they did not want players to be getting in trouble. The NFL has proven it's a place that people can get in trouble if you got a lot of money. I don't see how else that they could have passed up Las Vegas. Maybe they felt like they had too many West Coast teams. Maybe if you'd consider that West Coast. But
Maybe.
it really blows my mind that Las Vegas did not get it. I would have taken Las Vegas over Kansas City, New York, Philadelphia, Boston, even Miami. Miami made the list. I would have skipped Miami over them.
Oh,
I understand why they picked Miami, but
yeah.
I Vegas should have been easily in like the top like 5 picks for the U.S.
That's another one that I completely skipped over is Miami, in the Hard Rock Stadium, which I felt like that one also was kind of a given. Maybe that's why we kind of skipped over it.
It's in Florida. You got to hit something in that southern Florida tip to accommodate all these Latin American teams. It only makes sense. It's not really a shocker.
No, yeah. So, again, amazing city. I feel like that's another city that can handle infrastructure of a big event that's coming in to there. If the Hard Rock Stadium had been a little bit better of a stadium, I would say that'd be another contender for a final, right?
Yeah, it's just not super big. I don't know what the actual capacity is, but it's not super big. There's nothing really flashy about the stadium, but the city itself, the nightlife, Miami. I mean, we got LA and you got Miami. Those are really the two major cities in the US when you think of stadiums and stuff like that. So yeah, not really a shocker there, but I don't know, man. Las Vegas, I think if I own what the hell is the stadium called? If I own that shit, I'm a little devastated that the World Cup is not coming to Vegas.
Oh, Allegiant Stadium.
Yeah, Allegiant.
I think that was for me. I think that's probably one of the biggest surprises, if not the biggest surprise, of that it not getting a single game. Like you would think, and that I would imagine it
that could have hosted the final
for the final exactly. So
easily.
That was a little surprising, especially since Vegas is growing, and they're adding new franchises there. I know they're going to get a new MLS team. I think they are going to get a baseball team there. They just
I
got a
think so too.
so
Yeah.
they're a city that's growing, which you really don't think of Vegas as having potential to grow any more than what it is. But I mean, we've been there plenty of
It's
times.
growing. It's still growing.
Yeah,
Every time we go there, it's getting
it's
further
a little
south
bit
and
bigger.
further north.
Hmm.
Yep.
So that was surprising that didn't get picked. I think another surprising for me was Denver. I was actually surprised that Denver uh, didn't get at least a single game. Given that um, that Kansas City or Gillette, over in Boston, they
Yeah.
got games, and then Denver did it. I think another one for me was Chicago. I mean, Chicago is one of the biggest cities in the country, and
Hmm.
they actually do have a huge fan base with Chicago
Yeah.
Fire there. Uh, was it a little surprising that maybe Chicago didn't get a game?
Uh, Maybe a little bit, but I think honestly, outside of Vegas, my next big surpriser, I I understand why they didn't pick it, but I think that they could have invested money into it because that's what FIFA does. Is
Mm-hmm.
Nashville? Nashville probably has some of the best U.S. soccer fans in
Mm-hmm.
the entire country,
Mm-hmm.
and their stadium's not big. It only holds about like 40,000 people, if that. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
actually 26,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, they just built an entire 20 stadiums in Qatar. Like
Right.
you could have built up Nashville to host it. There's some really good
Yeah.
soccer fans in Nashville,
Mm-hmm.
and you would have pulled people from all up and down the East Coast. You would have pulled people down from the South, uh, Georgia, Mississippi,
Right.
um, Louisiana. Those fans would have
Mm-hmm.
gone there. You could have got the fans from Chicago to go there because it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like in the central location of the eastern part of the country.
Right.
That was the big shock to me. But yeah, Chicago
Mm-hmm.
makes a lot of sense too. Um,
And
Kind of
then
a little bit of shocker there.
So yeah, so you brought up a good point because Nashville they have that culture of again that being another tourist city, right? It being another
Yeah,
tourist attraction. You
yeah,
don't hear a lot of people vacationing in Boston or vacationing in
no,
Kansas City,
mm-mm.
So like that's why I feel like those and Philadelphia too. I mean Philadelphia, you go maybe because of the history, but it's not like it's a place you want to be at 4 o'clock in the morning drinking, right?
I could
Com-
probably list like 50 cities on my list in the U.S. before Kansas City.
right? And then another one that I felt was super surprising was New Orleans, and the Superdome over there in New
Hmm.
Orleans had just to me that one is another big shocker. Like, how did that not one got picked for
I
at least
probably would
one
have,
game?
I probably would have dumped Houston and picked New Orleans if they're
Yeah,
kind of like going through region, and you wanted to in the Central South. The Texas area, I probably would
right.
have dumped Houston and
Hmm.
picked up New Orleans because same thing. It's different. I mean, Houston and Dallas, they're like 2.5 hours away from each other. They're almost the same. Dallas is just a little bit more like,
Hmm.
in my opinion, modern. Houston's very
Hmm.
older Texas,
Hmm.
and then you got a little bit of Tex-Mex there, like we discussed
Right.
before. I would have stuck with Dallas and then Louisiana. That would have been a cool little culture, a little change, for a lot of
Hmm.
these foreign teams and
Right.
countries and fan bases.
I definitely agree, especially if you want people traveling to your tourist cities. Like
Hmm.
like we said before, there's other cities that people would rather travel to than than Boston or Kansas City or Philadelphia. Which I
Yeah.
mean, not saying that those cities are terrible or they're really
Hmm.
bad cities, but when you think of nightlife, you think of party and culture, especially during the summer. You're not going to find me in Philadelphia over New
No.
Orleans or even Chicago, right?
Right.
Um, what because we're running out of time. What big city would you say you would want to go to the game,
Uh,
other than the
Man,
ones in California?
let me pull up the list again. I mean, if I had to go, watch a really good game, honestly, I'd probably either go to Seattle or Dallas. I've
Mm-hmm.
been to Dallas. I've been to that stadium. It's
Right.
awesome.
Mm-hmm.
The Dallas area is super super dope.
Mm-hmm.
Extremely humid. I hate the humidity. Um, but going to a game in Seattle would be pretty dope. There's a
Yeah.
reason why it's called the 12th man. So
Right.
that'd be pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Miami wouldn't be terrible. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I guess I would just have to wait on that point. Who's playing who and where and stuff like that. My
Yeah.
objective is to see the U.S. play. But I think, yeah, those three, Seattle, Dallas, and Miami. If I had to
Mm-hmm.
pick one out of those three, I'm going Dallas.
Yeah, I feel pretty confident that the U.S. is going to play at least one game in California, so I'm not too worried about going to a USA game or that being it
Hmm.
super difficult because that for sure is going to be my priority going to a USA game and then of course going to a Mexico game in Mexico.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that's definitely. But my big choice, I think, outside of that, like you said, I think it would either be Dallas or Miami, because
Hmm.
because the AT&T Stadium, it's another state of the art stadium, right? It's like
Yeah. Oh yeah.
it's almost
It's really
considered
nice.
another wonder of the world, right? Because of
It's
like
huge, dude.
because
I've
of
never seen a
everything,
stadium like it.
yeah, because of everything that's gone into it. So SoFi and Levi for us, they're right down the street. But to make a
Hmm.
big jump across the country, I think Dallas or Miami, just because I love going to Miami. Every time I go, it's fucking awesome, and I like having a lot of fun. And it's another life stadium. It's the
So like
it,
Vegas would have been fun.
it's like Vegas on the beach for sure,
Yeah.
100%.